Hello and welcome to a special edition of Golden Nuggets with Silvia Eldawi. Today we're going to be talking about sustainability. It would be rude not to because we've got COP28 on our doorstep. So this episode I'm joined by Dr. Michael Waters, who is the best-selling Amazon author of The Essential Guide to the Dubai Real Estate Market. And he's a professor at Heriot-Watt University teaching real estate. Welcome to the show. Yep. So we've got to be honest. I've got very little understanding or knowledge of the sustainability sector, it's part of our industry. I don't know enough about COP28 or COP27 or 26.
Yep.
First of all, can you just start by telling us what is COP?
Okay. Well, very simply, it's COP means Conference of Parties.
Okay.
And it's
I did not know that.
No. So it's a United Nations initiative, so to speak, where governments, international governments, come together, typically annually, and discuss climatic action. So things that they can collectively do to help with managing climate risk. Okay. And probably one of the more recent agreements was at the Paris COP, where they agreed that there would be a warming limit of 1.5 degrees. So typically they're there to sort of take accountability of those types of targets, with a view that, we all need to be doing things to improve the management of climate risk and climate change.
So what are we trying to prevent here?
Global warming, depletion of resources, those major things.
That's the main thing. So every country needs to get their thermometer down to 1.5.
No, so that's the warming limit. So we're trying not to surpass. We're not trying to surpass. So we're saying that global warming might occur, but we don't want it to exceed 1.5 degrees by, I think it's 2050, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a way of sort of actioning things. And I think sustainability as a topic, where we are as corporations, as individuals, and obviously COP is at the government level, we really need to be more collective with our and more joined up with our actions. Otherwise, it's going to be very sporadic and not really impactful enough to reach those targets.
Let's go back to actually going, what is sustainability?
Okay.
Let's start with that. Yeah. I think I probably maybe hop skipped a few, but just explain what sustainability is.
I mean, there's a lot of definitions that exist around sustainability. So similarly in 1987, the term sustainability was about moving forward, having economic growth, but preserving resources. I think within the last 20, 30 years, that's evolved into various forms. So other definitions would say it's about environmentally
friendly
society and economic. So we have this 3 pillars of sustainability.
Okay.
So again, national governments like the UK and others, of course, have that as a framework of looking at sustainability. And more recently, at corporate level, organizations are complying with something known as ESG, which is environmental social governance. So it all is sort of an umbrella term behind sustainability.
My understanding of companies going more ESG, it had nothing to do with their caring for the environment, but more to do with their Moody's ratings and the rates at which they're able to borrow money. Am I right in that? In the US particularly.
Yeah. Well, I think where it moves away from profit, so it's profit, people, and place, is another definition of sort of sustainability. I guess what we've all lived through over the last few years, organizations are looking much more at people, human-centric things, wellness in buildings, with a view that for us to get the best talent to work for us, we need to focus on the social side and not just look at pure profits. So yes, there's always a financial relationship with sustainability. If we're going to enforce change, we probably need to do that through a financial incentive or a financial penalty. It's almost like teaching a child right from wrong. You have to incentivize good behavior and bad behavior.
So I know in the US at least, a lot of the big corporations, if they want to borrow money, the rating at which the banks will lend them money, the interest rate that they'll get offered is way more attractive if they've got a superior ESG rating. So that's an incentive there. I don't think that's happening here yet.
No, not that I'm aware of. But I think we've got to be careful that we don't. There's again So I've been looking at sustainability for. It was one of my first research projects at university, where we were looking at the impact of certain measurable outcomes and how consumers in real estate would be affected by that. I think we've got to be careful and not so skeptical about people paying lip service. So I think where we've evolved in sustainability is that whether it's a developer or an organization or a government even, there's a lot of rhetoric about sustainability. I'm doing, but what's the actionable outcome? So now we're saying, let's report on the actions rather than, the words. Actions speak louder than words, as we all know. Yeah. So that's where the accountability is.
Every year at COP28. So I imagine it's kind of like an annual board meeting between all the heads of state. Coming with their annual KPIs, how much energy they've consumed or saved, and what actually happens at COP28? Do they go around and say, "Oh, Brazil, you overdid it this year"?
I think there's it's about reaching a consensus. So again, maybe not looking at particular countries and saying, you're not behaving well, or you need to do more. It's more about, okay, what are we trying to achieve, and how are we all going to do it collectively? By having those measurable actions, then we can hopefully strive to get there. So it's almost like a corporate, if we think about corporate plans or any sort of strategy, you start off with those SMART objectives, don't you? So you've got to be specific, measurable, achievable, reliable and timely.
Right. I was trying to remember all of them. Okay.
I'm glad I remembered it, because I was worried there.
I'm sure you got one of them.
So that's almost how I would explain it, but of course at the government level.
Yeah. And apparently they don't wrap up until they've reached an agreement. That's what I've heard. Well, COP28 is not over until they've all reached an agreement. Okay. This is a real estate podcast.
Yeah.
Why is this relevant to the real estate industry, and why do real estate agents or anyone in the industry, what do they need to be aware of?
Well, I think real estate's a big contributing sector. 40% of global CO2 comes from real estate construction development activities. And we need to be accountable of what's happening. So as I just said, early on in that adoption, you want to be the first developer or the first organization who is engaging with sustainability, and that can be done for marketing, for corporate social responsibility and other things, to try and capture audiences to make profit. But I think now why it's important is because we all understand that climate risk is something really prevalent. The World Economic Forum measure annually the global risks. So things that are going to be very impactful and things that are going to be most likely to occur. And 5 out of those top 10 are all climatic, environmental risks. So where real estate is such a, the byproduct of the industry is such a contributor to that problem, so to speak. Developers, investors, occupiers of space really need to understand their role in making it achievable. And I think we are starting to see some changes. So, for example, we have energy labeling of buildings. So we can measure, or corporates or individuals or us as occupiers of space can make conscious decisions of, I'm going to choose that building because it's got green credentials.
Yeah.
But the challenge even with that is that you can have the best green building, and studies are showing that the occupiers don't know how to get the best out of the buildings. So again, the impact of that is that you're not seeing the carbon saving, because occupiers are like, we don't know how the technology works in the building. So that's changing and that's evolving. So I think the occupier phase of real estate is really important. The movement of sorry to go on for a bit too long, but the movement away from speculative-led development, where you're just building a product without engaging with, is this what people want? Is this what businesses want? That is also very prevalent with sustainability. So we need to reduce the amount of wasted space. So businesses can occupy, up to 50% more space than they actually need, because they're not measuring. They haven't got any metrics in their organization to say, have we got enough space? Do we need this much space? How are people using the space?
Well, it's interesting because if you've ever been to a real estate office, you know that like a third of it is taken up by the reception.
Yep.
Grand reception.
Yep.
And then the agent section is usually like sardines in a tin can.
Yeah.
Where they cram all the agents into like a call center, effectively.
But I think it's important because that's where the world's heading. There's a generation behind me and you, and even our generation are conscious about environmental aspects, and more and more corporates and individuals are making choices about, I don't want to be commuting long distances. I want to, as Dubai as an example, let's create spaces where the population can live within a 15 or 20 minute radius. That's a form of sustainability. Planning for the future. We know cities are only going to get more populated as the global population gets larger. So how do we manage and curtail urban sprawl and other things that...
And then you've got the kind of, the whole commute. You've got one car, one passenger, filling up the roads at 8:30 in the morning. You've got some companies that are leaning more towards work from home or flexible working, but still office space it's a big problem.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And, it's having the transit systems, isn't it, to be connected in a city, as a city grows and evolves, as we heard this week. Those transit systems need to catch up with that, so that people do have options to use greener alternative transport or work patterns, I should say.
And how does Dubai compare sustainability-wise to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, my book it's got a whole chapter on sustainability, so all my thoughts are embedded in there. But as a quick summary,
the bite-sized version,
or
the audiobook version, because I'm not going to read this until it's out on audio.
It's chapter 11.
I might just flick through.
Yeah. So I think what Dubai's done well, and I think when we measure, again, going back to the measurement of sort of green buildings. It's accommodated or adopted, the LEED certification, which is from the US. So it's an internationally recognized certification. The UAE has about 2/3 of the Middle East LEED certified buildings within the UAE. So it's again leading the region for having the the highest number of LEED certified buildings, and it's constantly thinking about how it can show exemplar development. So things like Expo City and retail developers are looking at how they can engage with tenants. So it comes back to what I was saying about, we've got green buildings, but historically we've got grey users. They don't know the technology. So let's engage with those tenants and let them sign up to an occupancy whereby they're committing certain sustainability goals. So there's, Expo City is a good example of that. Majid Al Futtaim have a few retail malls where they sign these tenants. So the tenants aren't selected by the checkbook; they're selected by the ethos of being green and more sustainable. So that's a bit of an interesting dynamic. And of course, we've got things like sustainable city developments whereby the energy generated in those developments contributes to financial aspects. So service charges are lower because there's a generation of energy from the solar panels. But it's a whole ecosystem. You know, as you said, banks need to be engaged because they need to start offering consumers who make sustainable choices more favourable terms on lending or debt. So there's examples of that. You know, the industry so agents and valuers who work in the sector, and they find evidence that wait a minute, people are actually paying more for these buildings. They need to have more strategic conversations with clients to say, this is where you're going to get the longevity of your returns. You know, no longer is it like risk, you know, that risky to have something that is sustainable. That whole sort of breaking the myths is what I present in the book. You know, what needs to happen for us to really engage with sustainability, and so measuring is important. You know, looking at assets that are going to become obsolete. You know, buildings that aren't green are going to suffer a huge obsolescence because consumers and businesses are going to be driven by making the right choice. And if your building or your apartment isn't smart or energy efficient or you know, retrofitted to some degree, then you're going to lose customer. You're going to have voids, and you have this brown discounting that is evident.
But do people really care? Because I'll give you an example. In the UK, so one of the bits of legislation that came in while I was in UK real estate was the EPC, which was the Energy Performance Certificate. So that became mandatory, I think, in 2008. And any property that was being advertised now had to have essentially a surveyor or an energy performance certificate surveyor. I can't remember what they're called. And they would come and inspect the property, look at, you know, the boiler, whether the windows are double glazed, whether there was insulation or whatever, and then mark it on a sliding scale from A to F or A to G. A being superb, and I don't think it was possible to have an A property. You might get a B property. And G was terrible. It's going to cost you a fortune in energy to survive in this property. Most properties were in the C to D range, were hovering around there. And the government kind of said, right, you've got 10 years to get your act together, landlords, because in 2020, for example, we are not going to allow anyone to rent out a property as a landlord if it falls below a F rating, I think it is. So, you know, people spent a lot of money on, you know, combination boilers, insulation, and so on. And now they've just postponed or delayed that ruling. So, but nobody actually stops and says, oh, it's an E rating. Oh, I don't think I could. I love the house. I love this property, but I don't think I can take it. And in fact, actually, probably the nicest properties, because they're older and they have more character, are an E rating. So do people actually care?
Well, I think they should care, because otherwise I wouldn't be sat here. But, you know, they should care. I appreciate the point that you make. So that's all part of the minimum energy requirements or standards that are there. It's that financial push, that encouragement to say, look, landlord or
like
institution,
a punishment, like a carrot and stick.
So no property investor wants an unlettable property. So it's a way of encouraging that, I guess, through a free market approach. There are grants and subsidies available in the UK. I think the UK has a very different challenge to Dubai. I mean, Dubai's, you know, a young city. It's the buildings, a large proportion of the building stock is probably within 15, 20 years old. It's not hugely historic, and therefore that kind of retrofit problem probably isn't as prevalent as in the UK. But again, that collective is what can we do is looking at that housing stock in a country like the UK and saying, what can we do? We're going to have wins. We're going to have bigger wins with this type of housing stock. And sustainability isn't just about let's blast these and make them energy efficient and lose the whole heritage and character. You know, sustainability is also about preserving heritage. So, you know, they don't want to be sort of penalising someone who wants to live in an older property, and I don't think they can, because it's such a large proportion. So I think it's about what can be done gradually, but collectively. So there are very much more smart people than me trying to work on those problems, but it's going to be a challenge, and that is I think consumers. So in 2006, I did a piece of research, and again it was updated by another set of academics in London as well, whereby those attributes of space, location, accessibility, they're still going to be the most prevalent reasons why we choose to locate where or choose the residence that we live in. We're not all of a sudden saying, okay, I'm going to live here because I'm net zero, but I'm in the middle of nowhere. It's got to be a balance.
There's got to be a balance. And like recycling, for example, I know I'm guilty of not being I'm guilty of not being a recycler.
Okay.
I was guilty of it in the UK. I never, separated things. But my sister was very, very strict on it. She'd always separate her plastics and papers, and she would recycle. Now, when she came to visit me, and I won't mention which building I was living in at the time, but she was quite impressed that I'd had a recycling section near the trash area. And I was like, okay, no, I recycle, yeah. And then she said to me one day, she's like, I caught them emptying out the recycling and they just mix it with the trash and it just goes in the trash. So is it a case of we're pretending to put recycling trays and bins, but actually it all ends up in the same place? You don't have to answer that. You probably don't know the answer where it all ends up. But yeah, there is a bit of, is it just a case of, oh, we're eco-friendly and, look at us? Or are we actually doing something about it? So it's no good developers saying we're, developing this green building.
I think at the individual level, so the resident level, I think there could be that skepticism in any market that, my actions are just very small, but I see on the news this government is doing X, Y, and Z, and whether I recycle this or that, it's not going to make a difference. I think within the real estate sector, we've got to look at things also from the fact that, development is the biggest, carbon emitter of the process. So are we building the right type of product? Is there flexibility in that product? Is it embedded in the terms of mixed use, retail, office, residential within a close proximity? And in Dubai, we're quite good at doing those types of developments where you can get everything you need. I mean, it's nice to go outside different neighborhoods and engage with new parts of the city and everything else. But day to day, can I get everything I need within a short geography? I think that's really where the development mindset should be. And if you look at, some of the new developments going on in Dubai, there's a lot of added value that develop. There's a lot of green space and social space that has dollar signs above it or dirham signs that they've said, well, no, we're going to make this a community space. It's those kind of things that add the value, don't they? And link into sustainability, proximity to schools, workplaces, and other things like that, help reduce the transport problem or the car dependency issue that we have in major cities. And
in terms of, because we had Jean from Property Monitor on the show talking about data, and data and sustainability are paired together, because effectively you can't make decisions without having the data. But why is that so important? What's the link?
Well, I think it's again the strategy, isn't it? So, I mean, I've even seen it in the residential space. People monitoring through technology how they use spaces. So, as much as we'd like to think, I need X amount of bedrooms and I need a large living room and this and that, large garden. If we actually measured it through technology, we'd probably realise that our daily habits or our workplace habits are fairly, I'm limited, sat in the living restricted. Room. I'm there in the, I spend more time sat on the couch or wherever it might be as our favourite spot. So we have much more by capturing it through technology. And the easiest example is an organisation and the workplace, and I know there's sensitivities. I'm being tracked at work, but it's where the world's heading to. Most of us, I haven't got one on today, but I normally wear a wearable to tell me how many steps I've done, how many calories I've burnt. All of that in the workplace will help organizations decide on what types of spaces are my workforce using. How much space do we really need? And I know there's sort of legislation to say you must have this much space, but that's kind of coming down as a number as well. So therefore, as an organization, we don't need to take large amounts of space. The other alternative, I guess, would be to allow businesses to sublease, but also offer some sort of subleasing revenue space, so you can actually monetize efficiency. And they might have a food retailer, seems the most obvious thing, or a coffee shop as part of that space that they've let on, and there's a revenue for them also. So there's again that link to the financial incentive, but it means that we're not building so much space or wasting space. So technology will help all of that.
And it is linked to prop tech as well. So what's the connection there?
Well, so we've mentioned LEED, haven't we, which is about the environmental aspect. There's also wired and smart scores, which again talk about the technological capacity of buildings and occupancy there. So there's many more metrics that aren't just, so sustainability isn't just about solar panels, energy efficiency. It's about the usability of the space and the reducing wastage through having too much space. So those metrics allow for businesses to make a clear plan. As I say, the most important, as we said at the start, to do with COP28, you've got to be able to measure something in order to action something, and therefore have some KPI to respond to. It's like
saying you want to lose weight, but you're just going to use the mirror to decide. No, you've got to weigh yourself to see your progress.
And I think that's a very good example with sustainability in general. We all, I'll talk about me personally rather than everyone else, but I always say, I want to eat healthier, I want to be more active. But, as you say, turn the mirror on yourself and have a look. You need to make some changes to get progress. But so numbers and technology will allow that process to be much more efficient, and also things to do with capturing, so not just the space, but also building defects. Technology is working to solve that problem, that there's a proactive maintenance so that the buildings get better managed, they last longer. We don't need to spend a lot of time.
So apart from people like me who don't recycle, what are the key challenges that we face?
Okay, I think in a few points, and I can't capture everything, but if we think real estate and the impact that it has on the planet, it's going to be something around the challenge of speculative development versus sustainable development, and making it more aligned so that the occupiers of these spaces are engaged early on. So that's turning the challenge to an opportunity. So again, we create buildings that are more dynamic, more flexible, more what occupiers want, and those occupiers are engaged in the development process rather than we're going to build something and then sign the tenants up afterwards. I think that would help just realign things. Obviously, again, looking at technology and developments there, hoping that there's some, buildings last longer, so we don't need to redevelop them as frequently or repurpose them. And that's going to be driven largely by, again, us as consumers and businesses as consumers chasing the best space. So that best, that criteria of what is the best space is going to have some credentials behind sustainability.
But for a real estate agent, what questions should you be asking your future buyers? What should you be listening out for? Because some of them are conscious of it, some of them aren't. But and one of my guests previously said, we're still selling on square foot. No one's mentioning all the eco-friendly initiatives that are being, they're not using that to sell. But what does the industry know? What does the industry players need to do or be aware of to be part of that?
I mean, it's all about feedback loops, isn't it? And it's going to be done. That race to green or sustainability. It's going to be one with some traction behind it. So not every consumer, business or individual, is going to be overly concerned with green or sustainable attributes, but there will be an opportunity for that first in line to leverage off scarcity. So we know that rental. So if we look at the cash flow and put it in terms of how the language that an investor speaks is, am I getting a rental premium? Is the security of that income preserved through sustainability, i.e., am I going to get less void periods? Can I potentially save money on service charges because of the technology in the building, creating some energy for reduction of service charges? And are the sales values going to be higher? So once that dialogue and that rhetoric gets out in the industry,
part of the vocabulary,
and everything's going to be about risk. I think individuals and organizations are looking for much more flexibility, but I think there is going to be an environmentally conscious consumer, at a larger scale than what we've seen historically, driving this as well. So an agent needs to, I think the language of sustainability is still financial. So you gave the example of the energy ratings and the progressive increase in that. That's a financial penalty, isn't it? If you don't get to these standards, you're not letting out your property. Similarly, in Dubai, you've got building classification of the existing stock, and there's potential for that to be linked to the RERA rental index, so that we can say, well, I want to increase the rent by 5% more than what my neighbours are charging because I've got smart technology. I've got all these features that are going to save that tenant money. So it's thinking a bit more collectively, I guess, would be an opportunity, and agents to not force upon a particular view, but collectively value as agents and developers and off planet. They're kind of like they're at the forefront of the communication, aren't they? So that then all feeds back into the ecosystem, so that developers start to say, well, actually, it is financially attractive to build these green developments, and these work well. And investors will say there's less risk in sustainable buildings, so I'm going to invest in an institutional type product and have those more stable returns, because again, businesses want flexibility. So if I don't give them the ESG compliant stock, or if I haven't got it up to a certain criteria, then I'm not going to be able to charge aggressive rents or even have a sustained cash flow. So I think that's always going to be, that's where you're going to get the big wins, is if we say, it's almost, as I say, going back, it's like the child, incentivize the behavior. I think if we're left to our own devices, we won't get anywhere. And building codes and building regulations are a way that we can creep those standards up. But of course, that doesn't, over time. So that Dubai is a new city. The building stock isn't as large as the UK, but over time, if we just focus on the building codes, we're not addressing the existing buildings in that space. So we do need some classification and rating systems, which we've discussed, and there needs to be some financial incentive to promote action, so it's more collective, which I think is where the podcast started, didn't it?
Yeah. We've come full circle.
Yeah.
I've learned a little bit more. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
I understand it more now, and I think we'll just finish off by, if you could just say how big of a deal it is that COP28 is on our doorstep this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of misconception about the progress that's being made, and I think we've got real flagship developments. Masdar, Sustainable City. We've got Sustainable City rolling out into other Emirates as well. That development concept is clearly attractive because we're seeing a rollout of that, and it's good for the world to see, similarly to Expo, to see what progress the region is making, and not being too I wouldn't say naive, but judgmental on the fact that there are challenges. I think every global location has a degree of different challenges, but I think Dubai wants to make itself, or the UAE, I should say, is as an exemplar. We're creating innovation. We're getting behind concepts to do with technology, like the smart city and sustainability. In some way, they're linked as well. So it's an opportunity for the world to look at what the UAE is doing, and I think that's as with any sort of world exhibition, even if you're not part of it, you're going to be curious about those types of developments, and I think people will be surprised to read about it in my book or elsewhere of the developments.
The final plug.
Yeah, the final plug, the last one. No, but I think there's a lot of good things happening here, and a lot more to look forward to, I think, in the region.
Excellent. Well, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And join us for next week's episode of Golden Nuggets with Silvia Eldawi. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Bye. Brilliant.